the great people of Nairobi City County, and also one of the longest serving Secretary General of ODM, the longest at the moment because others have been moved out of the office, Chair, and I hope he survives longer, although nowadays he's trending on some interesting grounds. Mr. Chair, and I am happy that in as much as he's a first timer in this house, he continues to prove himself that he is a man of the moment and still. And I can see, Mr. Speaker, the minority leader is excited because he's a ranking member and also is one of the senior lawyers in this country, but not a ranking member like you. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to support this amendment. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the former President Uhuru Kenyatta formed a task force to review power purchasing agreements. One of them, the biggest challenge in the cost of electricity in this country, has been the buy-in by the independent power producers that sell electricity expensively to Kenya Power and Lighting Company. While, Mr. Speaker, there are many challenges that Kenya Power and Lighting Company, from in my village in Kapkeben in Mosoriot Township in Nandi County, Mr. Speaker, out of 24 hours, Kenya Power decides to switch off electricity for almost 20 hours in a day. In fact, it becomes worse when it rains, because Kenya Power is like they now remove electricity because it's raining, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the challenge and the cost of doing business in this country, and you know me, I use domestic power, not even talking about the access of power within Nandi County and across the country, which continues to be a big challenge. I know for Senator Sifuna, he might have a privilege that most of the city is covered by electricity. But the biggest elephant in the room, Senator Sifuna will tell you, is out of 24 hours, 3/4 of the time there are blackouts, and it affects the business, even the small businesses within Nairobi City County, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, as we try, I know I've noticed, Mr. Speaker, that the demand and supply, there is a thinning of 4%. And the cabinet the other day, although I want to thank the National Assembly, they declined to give a nod for opening of power purchase agreement through IPPs because it was not clear. It's still opaque, Mr. Speaker. While we agree we need a constant supply of electricity, that is not a justification to buy electricity expensively and in an opaque manner, Mr. Speaker. And that is what the former president initiated through the task force that was appointed to review power purchasing agreements. And that report, Mr. Speaker, was given back on 28 September 2021. Mr. Speaker, in that report, the government had proposed that the cost of electricity will come down by 3%. If that would have come, Mr. Speaker, the cost of buying tokens, be it prepaid or postpaid, by customers across the country, by domestic customers, by industrial customers with that leverage that Kenya Power and Lighting is trying to provide, Mr. Speaker, including the street lighting, the heavy users of electricity in this country, Mr. Speaker, apart from domestic users, the cost should have come down by 33% after that report, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was resolved, and I would request that the Energy Committee, which I think Senator Sifuna sits, unfortunately I can't see the chair of Energy Committee, should tell us that the recommendation of that report, Mr. Speaker, was that within 4 months at the submission of that report, they should have been renegotiations of power producing agreements, or power purchase agreements, sorry, in renegotiating of IPPs, because it was very expensive and opaque, Mr. Speaker. I want to request, as I support the amendment by Senator Sifuna, that the Energy Committee should tell us the outcome of renegotiating by Kenya Power and Lighting Company. And on the issue of power purchasing agreement through the IPPs, what was the outcome, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, are you aware that there are many power purchasing agreements that remain unsigned? It should have been cancelled. So I want to encourage the Energy Committee to look at this issue, because this is how money is being stolen. It is violating under Article 201, Mr. Speaker, where we are talking about openness, transparency, and accountability in financial matters in the Republic. Because if up to today there are PPAs power purchasing agreements through independent power purchasing suppliers to the Kenyan Power, who sell to Kenyan Power Lighting Company, onward transmission to domestic and industrial use, Mr. Speaker, then we have a problem as a country. I think as we support this amendment of the Energy Act by Senator Sifuna, the Energy Committee should tell us if these power purchasing agreements that were unsigned have been cancelled. And that is corruption, Mr. Speaker. If it works, looks like a duck, then it is a duck, Mr. Speaker, or an ugly swan, as somebody would say it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in that report, in line with this, there were supposed to be reforms within Kenya Power and Lighting Company. We are not yet to be told what happened with the investigations into the faulty transformers that were being left here in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, in Nairobi. No one can tell us up to today what happened to faulty transformers, who was held accountable. There are many primary schools, even in Bomet, in Nairobi here, in Nandi, in Migori, in Kilifi, Mr. Speaker, that have perpetual faulty transformers. No one has told us the audit on those faulty transformers, what became of it. You remember Senator Stewart Matsayo in the last session, we raised you and cry over faulty transformers. Up to now, no one has been arrested or charged in court, or the fate of those faulty transformers here in Nairobi. I shudder when I think that faulty transformers might have been even supplied to you or to Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We need to know the outcome, and therefore the reform of Kenya Power and Lighting Company, because the problems of power purchasing agreements and even independent power producing agreements, Mr. Speaker, is the lethargy, the opaque nature the Kenya Power and Lighting Company has. And therefore, even in that report, the task force report of 2021, there was a proposal that we must restructure and clean up Kenya and Power and Lighting Company management, Mr. Speaker, because they are perpetuating systemic corruption. You do token purchase, the people who are doing postpaid, there are people who are doing prepaid, Mr. Speaker, there are people who do not have electricity. What can you say? Is it not corruption when our whole school or our whole village goes without electricity for months, yet Kenya Power find it's normal? I think it is shocking. And Mr. Speaker, I saw the CS in charge and the good brother of Senator Sifuna, CS Opio Andai, saying that cabinet secretary, saying that Adani is now doing a purchase agreement on that issue. And I think the chair of roads is familiar what we are talking about, Mr. Speaker. They were arguing that the reason they want to improve the transmission lines, it has become old. And therefore, I want to agree with Sifuna, when you don't communicate the clarity of information, the policy of government should always be crystal clear. Say that when CSOP Wandai today says there is an engagement or privately initiated plan by Adani to provide support through even purchase of transmission line through Bomet all the way to Awasi, Kisumu, the improvement of power lines, the pylons are grown, Kenyans to understand. But if you do these things in secrecy, it violates Article 34, 35, Article 201, Mr. Speaker, that Senator Sifuna, you know Senator Sifuna and the House, we should not be too prescriptive. The reason we have to make prescriptive laws, Mr. Speaker, and you are a learned senior in this country, having been classmates with Senator Sifuna, is we have to be prescriptive in this country. We have to tell you, don't do this. It is because of our bad manners as a country. That is, it is because what was it added? It is already in Article 201. Why is it added to make public a power purchasing agreement through IPP? Until Senator Sifuna tells Kenya Power, no, you must do this, the amendment. That is the bad manners that we have in this country of impunity and corruption, Mr. Speaker. In that report, Mr. Speaker, the report of 2021 demanded that we do forensic audit. And I want to ask the Energy Committee through your office, Mr. Speaker, to tell us these power purchasing agreements through IPPs. There was a statement, Mr. Speaker, and I remember in the last session, there was a statement, an investigation done by this House that showed that you have a local company, IPP, it is a local Kenyan registered company, but is selling power to per kilowatt, Mr. Speaker, to Kenya Power in dollars. Yet it is a Kenyan company. Mr. Speaker, can you believe the impunity that is roaming around in this country, Mr. Speaker? The company is registered here in Kenya. The director is here in Kenya. The trade is domiciled here in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, but they sell the power to Kenyan Power and Lighting for distribution and transmission through in dollars, Mr. Speaker, or in pounds. Those are the people that forensic audit should have been done and be charged in court, because that is public rip-off of a hard-earned money, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to say in this issue of openness on power purchasing agreements, especially through independent power producers, personally, Mr. Speaker, I don't have a problem. We are not saying that IPPs or people do independent power producers in this country, Mr. Speaker, they should not do business. But we want them to do clean business. We want them to abide by the rules and the law of the Republic of Kenya. If I establish a solar power generating company in Kilifi, or a wind energy, and I intend to sell to Kenya Power and Lighting Company, why don't I sell it in Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker? And that is the openness, the accountability, and transparency, Mr. Speaker. And as the chair of the Senate caucus, and I'm happy you attended that session of open governance, Mr. Speaker, one of the issues, Senator Sifuna, through the Speaker, was legislative openness. We must be open in terms of legislation and implementation by executive, Mr. Speaker, going into the future. So even as Mr. Speaker, and I want to say, the cabinet and the parliament should not allow opening of PPAs until we agree on some ground rules. Because I can go and register my company in Bomet and decide to tell to Kenya Power in dollars. It will be a public rip-off. And I want to ask the Secretary General of ODM, CSOPO and I is your immediate former member of ODM. Kindly advise him that the only way he can redeem the image of Kenya Power and Lighting Company is to make sure the IPPs that has been signed for the last 10 years are laid bare in the public. And the truth shall set us, all of us, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy on the issue of Adani. He has come out quickly. He didn't wait for the airports, the way we went for the airports, Mr. Speaker. Even we could not access documentation. We had to use power of oath, power of intimidation, power of coercion for production of documents on Adani Jkia deal, Mr. Speaker. And that is why you had the young man the other day on Gen Z protest saying, and I'm happy that young man, he has got a sponsor. He was saying, uwanja wa ndege umeuzwa. Imeuziwa Muhindi, was being asked, umeuziwa nani? And we thought it is a joke. Only when the issue appeared before the Senator Chair of Roads, and I want to ask Senator Karungo Wadhangwa, the way he's standing on issues of Murima, strongly, he should stand on this investigation of Adani, Mr. Speaker. He should fear nobody. The Bible says, the Bible says, Mr. Speaker, don't fear that kill the body and the soul, that kill the flesh and the body, but do not fear only who kills the soul and the spirit. I want to challenge Senator Karungo Wadhangwa. The way is strong standing on matters of Murima. He should stand strong on the issues of Adani. We want to know what really happened to the airport, Mr. Speaker, including the Cherargei airstrip in Kericho. Has it been sold? That is the question many Kenyans have. What is the issue of private partnership in this country under the Act, Section 4 and Section 2 and Section 40, Mr. Speaker? I want to challenge Senator Karungo Wadhangwa, Mr. Speaker. The way he spoke with authority on Sunday in Kirinyaga, he should speak to these matters with the same figure and authority, and he should behave like a miracle senator for who he is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, point number 5, on this issue of moratorium, we should not lift a moratorium on the issue of power purchasing agreements through IPPs, Mr. Speaker. And that is the point. Before we lift a moratorium that was imposed in 2021 by the report and the task force that investigated the issue of power purchasing agreement and IPPs, Mr. Speaker, we must agree that there are ground rules that needs to be set, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for example, Kenya Power and Lighting Company buys from Kengen, Mr. Speaker, at 5 shillings and 30 cents per kilowatt. But when they buy from independent power producers, my brother Senator Eddie, they buy it at 195 shillings. Yet Kengen sells to Kenya Power at 5 shillings 30 cents. But when they get IPPs, these Mikoras, these corrupt individuals, Mr. Speaker, who are being protected, they buy it at 195 shillings per kilowatt, Mr. Speaker. That is more than 190 shillings from Kenchen. And this is a public report, Mr. Speaker, that Senator Sifuna, we need to know who these companies are. What is the contract that we are doing, Mr. Speaker, going into the future? So, Mr. Speaker, I agree there should be a register that should be open to the public. Let us know who are these IPPs, what is the engagement of power producing agreement, Mr. Speaker, so that Kenyans can access affordable electricity, Mr. Speaker. We cannot be talking about climate change and green energy if the person in Nyatike, in Mikori, cannot access electricity. They will buy Koroboi and they will pollute the environment, or they will fell down the trees in somewhere in Bomet, Mr. Speaker, in Jebalungu. They will be forced to go to the forest, cut down and light the fire. But if we can produce power to be accessible and affordable to everybody, Mr. Speaker, even in Tindret, where some of us come from, even in Nandi, Mr. Speaker, we must make the power in this country to be affordable. Even as we talk about cottage industries, Mr. Speaker, there are many people, my people are farmers, Mr. Speaker, of milk, dairy. We want to process and do our own farming. There are many people who are doing chicken farming or poultry farming. They need electricity. There are people who are processing dairy farm inputs, Mr. Speaker. They need electricity, Mr. Speaker. So I think this amendment is long overdue. I want to thank the Deputy Minority Leader, Minority Whip, that this is important, Mr. Speaker. I have noted that there have been serious renovations. I don't know whether it was the cost of the JNC. That is why we have been doing renovations, Mr. Speaker. We are asking the other day that we need to, Mr. Speaker, to be, what do you call these issues of being magnanimous in terms of spending, Mr. Speaker. But we are seeing opulence even in Parliament, Mr. Speaker. The other day, the JNC ran us out of town because of opulence. Now, Parliament, you can see that we didn't need a new carpet. Mr. Speaker, our committees, in fact, I wish the money that was being used to do renovation of paint, of carpet, we should have been given to committees to go and visit Naivasha, CGDC Naivasha, go and visit Wanainji in Kisumu, in Bomet, and ask them what is the challenge with electricity. We should be visiting projects in Bomet, in Nandi, in Migori, in Kiambu. Mr. Speaker, can you believe we don't even have funds as a Senate Public Accounts Committee to visit even Dandora Stadium here in Nairobi, or even visit Toi Market? But we have, Mr. Speaker, but we have money to buy a new carpet. We have money to do a paint, Mr. Speaker. I think as a Parliament also we must have a priorities, right? I had written through your office, through the joint services, Bwana Nyandiere, to provide evidence, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot be saying we are oversighting others, yet we cannot oversight ourselves, Mr. Speaker. Is the House aware that the pending bill of Senate is around 500 million? You sit in liaison committee. You cannot do even a public hearing on this matter, Mr. Speaker, even as we go for public participation. Mr. Speaker, with very many remarks, I want to thank Senator Sifuna for bringing this amendment. I hope we'll very fast-tracked. In the spirit of the broad-based, the President will sign it into the law, and we can be able to discuss the issue of power purchasing agreement, Mr. Speaker, going into the future, so that we can ensure, Mr. Speaker, the issue has been resolved. On the PPPs, I want to propose, Mr. Speaker, to Senator Sifuna and all of us in 2 minutes, that we need to relook about private initiated investments in the country, especially under PP, private partnership, Mr. Speaker. We can see the debacle of Adani, both in energy sector and in aviation sector, Mr. Speaker. Let us review the law, even the regulations, Mr. Speaker. Say that when you are doing PIPs, you want to do privately initiated as an investor, Mr. Speaker, there should be the law that governs and ensure that there is accountability. Let us be open as a country. If Parliament today wants to do PPP, let the parliamentarians or the public know why, how, who they are, how is the financing model shall be, Mr. Speaker, so that we reduce this chaotic manner of responding to issues of Adani, Mr. Speaker. Because we have been told now it's moved to health sector, it is moving to the aviation sector, it's moving to energy sector. Please, I want to, through you, Chair, in conclusion, please, I send Senator Sifuna, kindly tell CSOPO and I to be careful.